How's it going, everybody? I am here in Paris, France still, and I came down here because Trump had come into town and there were big protests planned. So yesterday I went down to a protest and it turned out to be not as big as we would have, at least I would have expected. There were a few hundred people, there was a decent-sized black bloc, and they got into a confrontation with the police, but the police controlled the situation very, very well. And ultimately, they ended up marching for only a few blocks before being kettled by the police and then ultimately dispersing. So not a whole lot happened. Unfortunately, I wanted to do more for Bastille Day and go out, film the fireworks, talk to some people, but I'm really sick right now. And so my head's been throbbing and I passed out super early, fever, the whole nonsense, and it was miserable. But that's not going to stop me from at least putting something together to talk to you guys about issues that I feel are important. So today I want to talk about a concept of, in media that I kind of talk about relatively often, I suppose, and it's the idea of the individual versus the brand that I want to elaborate on some things that I've been thinking about. So there tends to be people who just blindly trust mainstream media, or I shouldn't say blindly, but overall trust them, and there are people who don't. And what I noticed is that there's this strange understanding, this strange perception of how reporting works and how big news organizations do reporting. So for instance, with the Washington Post, who I've criticized several times recently, they put out a bad story. Dave Weigel said that Kim.com may be trying to fabricate an archive of emails to prove the Seth Rich conspiracy. That wasn't even based in reality. That assertion was literally made up. And the story itself about Kim.com and potential hackers was literally nonsense. It was poorly researched, if not researched at all, and it was really, really bad. And that reflects, to me, on the Washington Post, but mostly on the individual reporter. We also had this guy, Paul Farhi, who refused to correct an article when he incorrectly stated that James O'Keefe didn't disclose that the CNN producer was based in Atlanta, which James O'Keefe did, one of the first things he said. And eventually, Dave did fix his article, and Paul Farhi, an editor at least, I believe, corrected the article. So we've seen news organizations issue retractions, corrections. We've seen people fired for their bad reporting. CNN fired three reporters not too long ago because of a bad story. And so what ends up happening is we see individuals who say the organization is a lot of people that does a lot of work, and when they make mistakes, they correct them. They fired people, they issue retractions and corrections. However, there's another group of people that look at the individuals and say, if they're star talent, if these Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists, if these, one of these reporters with 300,000 Twitter followers are putting out bad information, we've caught it. How many times are they putting out bad information or fake news that we didn't catch? So what ends up happening is that being behind a brand gets people off the hook for the things they do. A journalist could write something bad, but people see Washington Post, they don't see the individual. And if the Washington Post doesn't issue a correction, then these individuals will leave with bad information and believing some fake story. Now, there are a more attentive group of people that will criticize the entire organization for the actions of a bad journalist, because the idea is, we'll use the Washington Post, for example, if they don't issue a correction, if there's not an editor or an executive editor or someone who's going to say, stop, what they're putting out is not good enough, there's no fact checking, okay? We'll use the Paul Farhi example. He said that James O'Keefe did not disclose this producer was based in Atlanta, but he did. Where was the fact checker? In which case, you get people who I would say fall more into like where I stand, saying, look, there's supposed to be some degree of accountability. And this guy, Paul Farhi, flat out tweeted out he wasn't going to correct the article, but eventually they did. Now, most people who read that article just see Washington Post. They don't see this individual journalist, so this guy's kind of shielded from the shitty attitude he had, from the bad work that he did. But something more interesting happens to independent journalists, people who don't have a brand to go behind. So there's a lot of people on the left who keep sharing this photo of me at dinner with Trump supporters, as if it's the most controversial thing in the world, and it proves that I'm some kind of like alt-right shill or some ridiculous thing. But, I have people tweeting this saying, explain this photo. Really? Explain a photo of me at dinner with people who support Trump? Explain what? I went to dinner with people who support Trump. We had a conversation. We had a bit of an argument, and guess what? Sometimes you have to meet people to learn about what they believe. Is that so shocking? But what happens when a big news organization sends a journalist out to meet with a crew? Well, for Vice, when I worked at Vice, I met with Brazilian gang leaders. I actually interviewed a Soviet general. I was in Fukushima for Fusion, meeting Fukushima disaster survivors. I was in Venezuela for Vice, meeting student protesters. Does that make me any of those things? Something really weird happens when you leave a brand and go and work on your own. People start using any interview you've done to prove that your politics align with the people you're interviewing. So most recently, the past couple of videos I did, I was in Belfast, Northern Ireland, mostly covering a celebration they call the 12th of July. And in Northern Ireland, there are two factions. There are the Unionists and there are the Republicans. And so, naturally, they're at odds with each other. And sure enough, there are American journalists who know literally nothing about what's going on there, saying that simply for interviewing people during their holiday, I was going to a cross burning. That what I was doing was akin to meeting with like hard right, KKK members. And it's absolutely ridiculous. Vice has met with cannibals, right? CNN, Reza Aslan, actually ate a piece of human brain. So a brand kind of shields individual reporters. I've been asked to do stories that are just too contentious, too dangerous, that I know I can't do without institutional support because of this. When you go to report somewhere, it is not you reporting on it, right? It is whatever your brand is. And as an independent reporter, of which there are very few, everything falls on my head. Tim Pool's hanging out with alt-right people or Trump supporters. And then people go from there and start making things up. Just flat out make stuff up to stretch the story simply because they don't like what I'm doing. I find, you know what I find very interesting is that there are people who are angry with mainstream media or there are people who are angry with alternative media, and they blame both sides for doing everything wrong. Here's the reality. I would say CNN is ratings driven. I think their commentary is really poorly done. I don't like it. But when it comes to breaking news, I give them like a C minus, maybe C plus. Like, yeah, CNN's going to give you information. I don't think that it's not worth watching at any point. I think there are better sources of information. Same thing with the New York Times and the Washington Post. I'm steering clear of the Washington Post because of the attitude of Paul Farhi and Washington Post not doing anything for several days when he got the story wrong. That leaves me in a strange space where I don't know if I can trust them. But even the New York Times, they tend to be okay. I'm very critical of a lot of the stories they do if they're using anonymous sources or third-party individuals who have nothing to do with the source. But it's still a news source that I will use, and if you watch my channel, you know that I actually cite many of these sites when I'm doing stories. So it's not black or white. It's not like I trust these organizations or I don't trust them. It's mostly just you've got to keep an eye out for the individual reporter and not just lump everyone under one brand. And I guess my final thought on this idea of brands versus individuals is that people think, for whatever reason, that I'm omnipotent. I'm omniscient, that I know everything, and can literally spend my time traveling around Europe, investigating things and trying to find stories, which I might add is very difficult, and at the same time comment on every little piece of politics that happens in the United States. So right now, Donald Trump Jr., email scandal, Russia meeting, spies. This whole thing takes a lot of time to understand. And I was in Germany, then Belfast, and Paris, and traveling is very difficult. So it's not like I can just do a video, I can sit down, research everything about this, and then say, great, I can do this video while flying to another country trying to investigate another story. I can do about one video per day, and that means that half my time is spent doing research, half my time is spent traveling, preparing, buying equipment. And it means, when I'm in the United States, yeah, I can prop my camera up here on this little windowsill and I can talk to you guys about issues that I think are important, but when it comes to traveling and trying to actually create news, instead of just reporting on something someone else has already reported, it's very difficult, okay? I try to balance what I do between I'm on the ground, I'm reporting on something that I am looking at that no one is really talking about, versus commenting on politics and looking into the finer aspects of the Donald Trump email scandal. People don't seem to understand that on my channel, it says news vlog, news video log. This is a channel about me doing my thing and the things that I think. It's a vlog. So you'll follow me around and I'm going to talk about stuff that I think is important. And now I get comments saying, Tim Pool making the story about himself again. Well, then why are you watching my YouTube channel if you don't like the fact that the YouTube channel is literally about me and the things I do and the places I'm at? I think, ultimately haters gonna hate. People are angry, people are jealous, and what I'm doing is a weird experiment in first-person vlog, news, etc. And it's always been. And there's always been haters, but as the channel grows, as more people join in to watch, there's just more and more criticism. But we're in a weird world, right? The people you associate with determine your politics instead of what you actually say. We're seeing attacks on Wikipedia, attack pages. We're seeing poorly sourced news, and we're seeing just this cultural civil war continue. But I'm not going to get into the cultural civil war just yet because it's something I'm looking into, and I think I'll talk about maybe tomorrow because it is really interesting to see what's going on. There's sort of this establishment versus anti-establishment cultural civil war happening. And one of the things I was thinking about is that why is it that people on the left will call other people on the left alt-right, right? So I literally am center-left libertarian, which means I believe more in social policies than like free market capitalism. I'm center-left, it's not too crazy, I have to say that all the time. But why is it then that someone's gonna call me or Dave Rubin or someone else alt-right? Because of the people we interview, or at least on a few occasions, I have hung out with people who are conservative. But I think the real reason is that it's establishment versus anti-establishment. But more on that later. I'm gonna talk about that tomorrow, maybe. We'll see what happens. I'm here in Paris. I'm gonna be flying to some random place. Where should I fly to? I could fly home, but I'm here in Europe, and the cheapest thing I can do is actually just continue the story and go investigate something. So this is basically me ranting about independent versus brand journalism. What do you think? We'll keep the conversation going in the comments. Comment below. Click the like button if you like the video. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Timcast. If you want to support the work that I do, you can go to patreon.com/Timcast. Give whatever you'd like, or give nothing at all. My videos will always be free and available every day at 4 p.m. And currently I am traveling through Europe, which I tend to do often. Maybe I should just go to a different continent for once, right? Yeah, I guess. I'll see you tomorrow.